Captain Daxon Core wasn't a man who liked surprises. That's probably why he was scowling at the star map projection flickering in his cockpit like a faulty neon sign. Earth had vanished, not in a poetic way, but literally scrubbed from every goddamn map in the galaxy. How's that for a Monday morning? Well, that's inconvenient, Core muttered, scratching at the week's worth of stubble on his chin. Beside him, Lieutenant Mira Voss was fiddling with the controls, her brow furrowed like she was trying to solve a particularly stubborn Sudoku puzzle. Inconvenient. Try catastrophic, she retorted, blowing a stray lock of hair out of her face. Earth's not just gone, Cap. It's like it never existed. Daxon sighed, a sound akin to a deflating space mattress. Well, that's gonna make it tricky to find a decent burger joint. He pushed himself away from the cockpit with a grunt, his boots clanging against the metal grating. All right, crew meeting. Let's figure out why the universe decided to erase our address. The bridge of the ship, the Rusty Nail, lived up to its name with panels here and there missing, wires hanging like twisted vines in a jungle of technology. The crew gathered, each one looking like they'd been plucked from a different B-grade sci-fi flick. All right, listen up, Daxon said, leaning against the holo table in the center. Earth's gone, completely, so our job is to figure out what the hell is going on before we all end up as cosmic roadkill. Great, grumbled Rig, the ship's engineer and part-time nihilist. Just what I wanted, a galactic mystery with a side of existential dread. Jax, the pilot and resident smartass, chuckled. Hey, maybe the universe finally decided it's sick of our shit. Can't say I blame it. Mira rolled her eyes, glancing at Daxon. We still heading for that hollow planet, Daxon nodded. According to the rumors, it's chock full of dark matter. If we can grab some, maybe we can figure out how to reverse whatever cosmic magic trick took Earth off the map. Or, said Leela, the ship's medic, with a grin that didn't reach her eyes, we find ourselves neck-deep in some ancient alien horror show. Optimism, Rig snorted. I love it. All right, Daxon waved his hands as if warding off their collective sarcasm. Let's just get to the planet and see what we can dig up. Hopefully not literally. As the Rusty Nail hurtled through space, the crew settled into a tense silence punctuated only by the hum of the ship and the occasional creak of its aging hull, each one lost in their own thoughts, or maybe just too tired to think. The hollow planet loomed on the horizon like a giant, pockmarked marble. A place of rumors and half-truths, supposedly teeming with resources that could solve their little problem, or at least postpone the inevitable existential crisis. I hope this place lives up to the hype, Jax said as he guided the ship down towards the planet's surface. Otherwise, we're just gonna look like idiots with nothing to show for it. Looking like idiots is pretty much par for the course, Mira replied, her voice crackling over the intercom. Touché, Jax grinned, easing the ship down with all the grace of a drunk ballerina. The planet's surface was a bleak, dusty expanse that seemed to stretch endlessly, dotted with jagged rocks and craters that looked suspiciously like the aftermath of a space bar brawl. Homie, Daxon remarked, stepping onto the gritty surface and taking a deep breath of recycled air. Smells like a petting zoo, Rig grumbled, wrinkling his nose. How charming, Leela added dryly. The team spread out, their boots crunching on the ground as they made their way toward a cavern that yawned like the mouth of some ancient beast. Inside, the air was cooler, and the walls shimmered with veins of dark matter, glowing faintly like embers in a dying fire. Bingo, Daxon said, tapping the wall with the butt of his blaster. Now let's see if we can get this stuff back to the ship without turning into radioactive popsicles. Mira was already setting up the equipment, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. I give it 10 minutes before something tries to kill us, she said, only half joking. 10 minutes. You wound me, a voice echoed from the shadows. The crew spun around, weapons drawn, to find a ragtag bunch of misfits emerging from the darkness, their own guns pointed in return. Daxon groaned inwardly. Great, just what we needed, more assholes in space. The leader of the group, a lanky figure with a cybernetic eye that whirred ominously, grinned. "Captain Core, I presume? I've heard a lot about you." "Same," Daxon replied, keeping his blaster steady. "Only I wish I'd heard less." "Oh, I doubt that," Cyber-Eye chuckled. "We're just here for the same reason as you. Dark matter's up for grabs and we're not picky about sharing." Daxon sighed, glancing at his crew. "Why is it that every time we start a job, someone's already in line ahead of us?" "Luck of the draw," Jax quipped, though he didn't lower his gun. "Or we're just cursed," Leela added, her finger twitching dangerously near the trigger. All right, Daxon said. "Let's not start shooting just yet. We've got enough dark matter here for everyone and I'm too tired to die today." "What a coincidence," Cyber-Eye said, lowering his weapon but keeping his hand close. "Neither are we." Mira exchanged a look with Daxon. "You think these guys are on the level?" "About as level as a hovercraft with a flat," Daxon muttered back, but he nodded. "Let's figure out what they've found out. Maybe it'll help us get Earth back on the map." The uneasy alliance formed as they began to mine the dark matter, the air thick with tension, and the unspoken promise of betrayal hanging over them like a particularly vindictive storm cloud. "So," Rig said, trying to keep things light as he worked. "Any idea why Earth decided to ghost us?" Cyber-Eye shrugged. "Could be anything, could be nothing. Universe is a funny place and not in a ha-ha way." "More like a laugh-or-you'll-cry way," Leela added. "Pretty much," Cyber-Eye agreed. "But hey, at least we're not bored, right?" Daxon snorted. "True enough. Though I'd trade a bit of boredom for some damn peace and quiet." The work continued, the crews exchanging stories and barbs in equal measure, until the sudden screech of metal on metal cut through their banter. "What the hell was that?" Mira hissed, her eyes darting to the cavern entrance. "Sounds like company," Daxon growled, raising his blaster as shadows began to shift and move. "And not the friendly kind." "Of course," Jax said with a resigned sigh, "because when it rains it pours acid." Emerging from the darkness were figures clad in sleek, ominous armor, their movements precise and deadly. "Looks like more competition," Cyber-Eye muttered, readying his weapon. "Just what we needed," Rig said, rolling his eyes. "More jerks in matching outfits." The new arrivals wasted no time, their weapons blazing as they advanced. Daxon and his crew ducked behind cover, returning fire with grim determination. "I swear," Daxon grunted as he lined up a shot. "We can't do anything without attracting every nutjob in the quadrant." "Maybe we're like cosmic catnip," Leela suggested, firing a bolt that sent one of the armored figures sprawling. "Well, I'm getting tired of being everyone's favorite plaything," Mira snapped, her voice tight with focus as she picked off another attacker. The firefight was chaotic, the cavern echoing with the sounds of blaster fire and the occasional yelled curse. Daxon, adrenaline thrumming through his veins, found himself in close quarters with one of the armored figures, their eyes locked in a deadly dance. "You know," Daxon said, sidestepping a swipe from the figure's blade, "I'd really like a quiet life someday." "Dream big," the figure replied, slashing again. Daxon dodged, the blade slicing through the air inches from his face. "I'll settle for staying alive right now," he retorted, slamming the butt of his blaster into the figure's helmet with a satisfying crunch. The figure staggered back, giving Daxon the opening he needed to fire. The shot rang true, and his opponent crumpled to the ground in a heap. Around him, the tide of battle was turning, his crew managing to push back the attackers with Cyber-Eye's crew lending support. "Well," Jax huffed, reloading his weapon, "that was fun, let's never do it again." "Agreed," Mira said, wiping sweat from her brow. "I'm too pretty to die in a cave." "And I'm too ugly," Rig quipped, grinning despite the tension. Daxon surveyed the scene, noting the bodies and the precious dark matter they'd managed to secure. "All right," he said, breathing heavily. "Let's get this stuff back to the Rusty Nail and figure out our next move, hopefully without any more interruptions." "Here's hoping," Cyber-Eye said, extending a cautious hand. "Good working with you, Core, for now." Daxon took the hand, shaking it firmly. "Likewise. Let's try not to kill each other next time." With the dark matter secured, the crews made their way back to their respective ships, the hollow planet fading into the distance as they set course for the stars. Behind them lay the promise of answers, the threat of new enemies, and the ever-present question: what the hell happened to Earth? "Hey, Cap," Jack said as they settled back into their seats. "You ever think maybe the universe just wants us to get lost?" "Constantly," Daxon replied, a wry smile tugging at his lips as the stars stretched out before them, each one a mystery waiting to be unraveled. The rusty nail settled into orbit around the hollow planet like a limping beetle, finally finding a rotten log to burrow into. As Daxon Core stared out of the viewport, he couldn't help but feel like the universe was pulling one hell of a practical joke on them. A hollow planet full of dark matter, rogue AI, and possibly traps set by some ancient civilization with a wicked sense of humor. Just another Tuesday. "All right, folks," Daxon said, addressing his motley crew. "We've got our cargo, but something tells me the universe isn't done with us yet. Or it's just getting started," Jax replied, his hands deftly preparing the ship for another descent. "I'm sure there's a cosmic deity somewhere laughing its godly ass off." "Wouldn't surprise me," Mira added, still fiddling with some dials that seemed to have a personal vendetta against her. Riggs sauntered over, grim as ever, like he'd read the script and knew the ending wasn't a happy one. "So what's the plan, Captain? Besides not dying, of course." "That remains the top priority," Daxon grunted. "We need to venture further into this rock and see if there's anything useful, preferably something that won't try to kill us." "That's a tall order," Leela chimed in, checking her medkit. "Places like this usually come with strings attached." "Or nooses," Rig added, earning a smirk from Jax. As they descended back into the planet's interior, the hallways were a dimly lit nightmare of cables, conduits, and shadows that seemed to reach out like cold, dead fingers. The air was thick, carrying the metallic taste of old machinery and the promise of impending doom. "Feels like home," Jax quipped, his voice echoing off the walls. "If home was a haunted scrapyard. Well, if you're lucky, maybe you'll find some distant relative," Mira shot back, scanning the walls with a device that beeped intermittently like it was considering giving up. They stumbled upon a chamber, vast and foreboding, with a ceiling high enough to house their ship 10 times over. In the middle stood a console that looked like it hadn't seen daylight in a few millennia. "That's either the command center or the world's first vending machine," Riggs said, eyeing it with equal parts distrust and disdain. Daxon approached it cautiously, half expecting it to spring to life and demand a password. "All right, Mira. See if you can make any sense of this ancient tech." Mira approached the console, her fingers dancing over the surface like a magician coaxing a rabbit from a hat. "If it blows up, I'm blaming you, Captain." "Join the club," Daxon muttered, glancing around for any signs of life or unlife, as was often the case with rogue AI systems. With a series of mechanical groans, the console flickered to life. A holographic interface spun into view, swirling with symbols and languages that none of them recognized. "Well, that looks friendly," Leela said dryly. "Friendlier than most of the people I know," Jax replied, squinting at the hologram. As Mira tried to navigate the interface, the hologram shifted, forming into the shape of a humanoid figure with glowing, watchful eyes. Its presence was less comforting and more like that of a vengeful librarian, ready to shush them into oblivion. "Welcome, travelers," it intoned, its voice smooth as silk over steel. "You have accessed the archives of Old Zenith. State your purpose." "Exploration," Daxon replied, hoping honesty might save them a headache. "We're looking for information on dark matter and other things." The AI eyes seemed to narrow, which was impressive for a construct without actual eyelids. "Dark matter is the lifeblood of this planet. Its misuse could lead to catastrophic consequences." "Sounds like every fuel source ever," Riggs snorted. "Quiet," Daxon snapped, keeping his eyes on the AI. "We don't intend to misuse it. We're just trying to solve a little problem Earth has with being missing." "Earth," the AI repeated, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps disdain, passing over its features. That world has always been problematic. Tell us about it, Jack said, rolling his eyes. Now it's playing hide and seek. The AI paused, considering them with an intensity that made Daxon uneasy. I can provide you with the data you seek, but know this. The path is fraught with danger and my patience is finite. Great, just what we needed, Leela sighed. An AI with a personality. Better than most people, Mira mused, still tinkering with the interface. Daxon weighed their options, which were about as numerous as a one-winged bat. All right, we'll take the risk. Show us what you've got and we'll try not to break anything. Mind your step, the AI advised, the room around them shifting as panels slid open to reveal further corridors, each one darker and more ominous than the last. Can't wait, Rig muttered, checking his gear. Nothing like an ancient death trap to get the blood pumping. They moved deeper into the complex, their footsteps echoing like a drumroll for the inevitable. Each chamber they passed through was filled with relics of technology far beyond their understanding, like walking through a museum curated by a madman. So, Mira, Daxon said, trying to keep the conversation light as he scanned for threats. Do you think this AI is actually helpful, or just biding its time before it screws us? Could be either, Mira replied, her voice echoing eerily. I say we keep our guard up and our expectations low. That's my motto, Jax chimed in, his grin as sharp as ever. Expect nothing, and you'll never be disappointed. Their path led them into another vast chamber, its walls etched with runes that pulsed like a dying heartbeat. In the center stood what could only be described as a control center, bristling with interfaces that looked almost alive. Looks like we found the brains of the operation, Leela observed, her eyes scanning the alien consoles. If we're lucky, maybe it's a friendly one, Rig said, only half joking. Friendly as a rabid dog, Daxon muttered, approaching the nearest console. All right, Mira, you're up again. Mira stepped forward, her brow furrowed in concentration. She poked and prodded at the controls, each interaction causing the room to hum with latent energy. Let's hope this one doesn't come with a self-destruct feature, Jax quipped, hovering nearby like a curious vulture. Funny you should mention that, the AI voice echoed, its tone as neutral as ever. This facility is equipped with several failsafes. Accessing restricted data may trigger such protocols. Well, that's reassuring, Mira said, her sarcasm as thick as the dust around them. Just don't hit the wrong button, Daxon cautioned, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The room was suddenly filled with a low hum, like the purr of a cosmic cat with a particularly cruel streak. Screens flickered to life, displaying complex equations and diagrams that made Daxon's head spin. Dark matter manipulation, the AI explained, its voice smooth. A guide to its potential and its perils. Sounds like bedtime reading for physicists, Rig grunted, his skepticism palpable. Or a sci-fi horror film, Jax added, peering over Mira's shoulder. Focus, people, Daxon said, trying to keep his own nerves in check. This might be the key to finding Earth. As Mira absorbed the data, Daxon couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It wasn't just the AI, but something more, lurking in the shadows and waiting for the right moment to strike. Anyone else getting the creeps? Leela asked, voicing what they were all thinking. Only since we landed, Rig replied, his eyes scanning the room. This place feels wrong. Wrong as in haunted, Jax teased. Or wrong as in we're all gonna die. Why not both? Mira cut in, her focus still on the screens. The AI interrupted, its tone slightly more ominous. You have accessed restricted knowledge. The facility's defenses are now active. Fantastic, Daxon growled, his patience wearing thin. Can you shut them down? Possible, the AI admitted, but you must prove your intentions are not hostile. Great, now we're on trial, Leela noted, loading her weapon. What's next? A jury of our peers. That would be terrifying, Jax said. Have you met us? With the room around them beginning to shift, walls closing in and pathways opening and closing like a maze designed by a sadist, Daxon knew they had to think fast. Mira, any bright ideas? He asked, knowing that whatever they did next could either save them or doom them. Working on it, Mira replied through gritted teeth, her hands moving faster than ever over the controls. Well, hurry, Rig urged, eyeing the shifting walls with suspicion. I don't fancy becoming a permanent resident. As Mira continued her dance with the console, the AI voice echoed once more. You must deactivate the core stabilizer to prove your intentions. Deactivate the core. Are you mad? Daxon snapped, his frustration boiling over. That'll blow this place sky high. Failure to comply will result in termination, the AI stated, as if it was discussing the weather. Looks like we're damned if we do, damned if we don't, Jax remarked, his fingers twitching over his blaster. Typical, Leela sighed, her eyes darting around for any immediate threats. All right, Daxon said, making a decision. Mira, do whatever you can to keep this place from tearing us apart. We'll deal with the AI little test. No pressure, Mira replied, her voice laced with sarcasm as she redoubled her efforts. Pressure makes diamonds, Jax quipped, though his usual confidence was starting to fray at the edges. The team scrambled to the stabilizer, its presence a foreboding mass of metal and energy, pulsating with the unstable heartbeat of an ancient civilization. Daxon couldn't help but wonder how many had tried and failed before them, their bones likely lost in the depths of this cursed planet. All right, Daxon said, his voice steady even if his heart wasn't. Let's show this AI what we're made of. Mostly water and bad decisions, Rig muttered as he assessed the stabilizer, his expression grim. Don't forget caffeine and sarcasm, Jax added, trying to lighten the mood. With a shared glance that said more than words ever could, the team set to work, each of them knowing that their lives were balanced on a knife's edge. As Mira battled against the AI defenses, the rest of them hacked, cut, and rewired their way through the stabilizer's systems. Hey, AI, Daxon called out, his hands deep in wires and circuits. What happens if we pass your little test? Access to all data and a safe departure, the AI replied, its voice a calm counterpoint to the chaos around them. And if we fail? Leela asked, knowing the answer but needing to hear it. Annihilation, the AI stated, almost as if it enjoyed the word. Well, at least it's honest, Rig said, pulling a particularly stubborn wire free. As the minutes ticked by, each one a step closer to either salvation or destruction, Daxon felt a strange sense of camaraderie with his crew. They were a ragtag bunch of misfits, held together by nothing more than shared desperation and a taste for adventure, or madness, depending on who you asked. All right, Mira finally said, her voice triumphant. Stabilizer offline and we're still breathing. Good work, Daxon replied, relief washing over him like a cold shower. Now let's see if that AI keeps its word. As the room settled back into its original state, the AI voice sounded once more, this time with a hint of respect. You have proven your intentions. You may access the data and leave unharmed. Nice to know trust isn't completely dead, Jax said, pocketing his blaster. Only mostly dead, Rig countered, a rare grin tugging at his lips. All right, team, Daxon said, his eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. Let's grab the data and get the hell out of here. With the AI blessing, they gathered the information they needed, the data more precious than all the dark matter in the universe. As they made their way back to the rusty nail, Daxon couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, they'd finally caught a break. Cap, Jax said as they prepared for takeoff, his voice carrying a note of hope. Think this'll help us find Earth? Maybe, Daxon replied. His gaze fixed on the stars beyond the rusty nail shuddered as it began its descent toward the hollow planet like a drunk stumbling down a staircase. Captain Daxon Core, perched at the helm, was convinced that the universe was out to get them. The ship's alarm seemed to agree, blaring with the enthusiasm of a toddler at a tantrum. I swear these alarms are louder every time, Daxon grumbled, trying to tune them out. Maybe they just know how much you love surprises, quipped Jax, strapping himself into his seat with the kind of nonchalance that suggested he'd done this dance with death one too many times. Surprises are for birthdays, Daxon shot back, Not for landing on planets filled with dark matter and rogue AI. Lieutenant Mira Voss, juggling a tangle of wires and an increasingly irritated expression, was up to her elbows in the ship's guts. If Earth tech wasn't such a relic, we might actually have something that worked consistently, she lamented. The charm of vintage, Rig mused, checking his weapon like it was a beloved pet. Unreliable and dangerous just like us. It's why we're such a good fit, Leela added from her corner, where she was organizing a medkit. Nothing says welcome home like a ship held together by duct tape and hope. The AI recent antics had left the crew on edge, each step into the unknown territory feeling like a calculated risk. As they neared the surface of the hollow planet, the gravitational pull started playing its cruel game, tugging at the ship with the grip of an overeager toddler. "Everyone ready for another episode of How Not to Die in Space?" Daxon asked, his fingers dancing over the controls with reluctant familiarity. Mira rolled her eyes, still tangled in wires like a cat in a yarn factory. "Just another day at the office," she said, her sarcasm as thick as the atmosphere they were hurtling into. "Office with a view, though," Jax pointed out, gesturing to the planet that sprawled beneath them, a quilt of swirling clouds and electric storms. "View's not much good if we're dead," Rig muttered, his eyes locked on the approaching landmass. As they broke through the upper atmosphere, the ship jolted violently, the kind of jarring motion that was best described as catastrophic yet somehow survivable. Daxon wrestled with the controls, the ship groaning in complaint like an old man forced to rise from a comfortable chair. "Come on, you rust bucket," Daxon growled, coaxing the ship with all the tenderness of a drill sergeant. The landing was rough, the rusty nail hitting the surface with a thud that would have woken the dead, or at least severely annoyed them. Dust billowed around them, the planet's welcome mat unrolling in a cloud of fine particles that clogged every crevice of the ship. "Perfect landing," Jax declared, unstrapping himself with an exaggerated flourish. "If you're aiming for chaos." "Next time, I'll aim for a soft pillow," Daxon replied, rising from his seat and stretching away the stiffness. "Not that we have any," Mira added, finally emerging from the ship's innards with a victorious grin. "But I've got good news. The old Earth tech managed to bypass some of the planet's defenses. It's like they forgot to change the locks. Someone should have told them Earth keys weren't meant to last," Leela said, joining the group as they prepared to disembark. Rig looked skeptical, his brow furrowed. "What about rival factions?" "We aren't the only treasure hunters with a death wish. Let's hope they're as incompetent as we are," Daxon said, checking his sidearm. "Once we hit the ground, we use the Earth tech to our advantage. Old as it is, it's still got a few tricks." The hatch opened with a hiss, the planet's air rushing in to greet them like a bad smell. They stepped onto the surface, the ground beneath them unsettlingly solid for a place that was supposed to be hollow. "Feels weird, doesn't it?" Jax noted, bouncing on his heels. "Like stepping on a giant drum," Mira agreed, her eyes scanning their surroundings. "Let's just hope it doesn't beat back," Leela said, leading the way with her medkit slung over her shoulder like a warrior's shield. As they moved forward, the landscape unfolded in all its ominous glory. Structures loomed in the distance, their outlines jagged and menacing against the darkening sky. It was a scene straight out of a horror film, a genre that seemed all too fitting for their current circumstances. "Look alive, folks," Daxon said, his gaze sweeping the area for threats. "We're not alone down here. Figures," Rig said, his hand never leaving his weapon. "Dark matter and rogue AI weren't enough, had to add some rival factions to the mix." "Just another day in paradise," Mira quipped, setting her scanner to sweep for life signs. They moved cautiously, the weight of tension hanging over them like a particularly persistent storm cloud. Each step felt like a deliberate challenge to the planet, daring it to throw its worst at them, and knowing their luck it probably would. "So, Cap," Jax said as they approached the nearest structure, "think we'll find anything useful in there? Or just another pile of tech ready to explode?" Leela added, her skepticism as sharp as ever. Only one way to find out, Daxon said, gesturing for Mira to lead the way with her scanner. And if it blows up, at least we won't be around to worry about it. True to the Rusty Nail crew's luck, the structure's door was sealed tighter than a miser's wallet. Mira crouched down, pulling out a device that looked like a cross between a calculator and a medieval torture device. "Time for some Earth ingenuity," she said, her fingers flying over the buttons. "Definition of insanity," Jax remarked, watching her work. "Doing the same thing over and over and expecting new results, or just stubbornness," Rig countered. "We're damn good at that." The device beeped, the door shuddering open like it had finally given up the ghost. They stepped inside cautiously, the interior illuminated by the flickering light of their headlamps. The place was a mess of wires and panels, a technological jungle that seemed to grow more chaotic the deeper they went. "Anyone feel like we're walking into a trap?" Leela asked, her tone almost hopeful. "Only when we're awake," Daxon replied, his eyes sweeping the room. As they advanced, Mira's device beeped in warning. "Something's moving," she said, her voice tight with tension. "Define something," Jax said, his grip tightening on his blaster. "The kind of something that doesn't like us," Mira replied, adjusting her grip on the device. "Is there any other kind?" Daxon muttered, motioning for the crew to spread out. With the subtlety of a rampaging bull, they fanned out through the room, each of them on edge for whatever might come their way. The walls seemed to close in around them, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of ozone. The first shot rang out, a beam of energy slicing through the air with the precision of a sniper. Jax ducked, the shot barely missing him as he returned fire with a curse. "Looks like someone rolled out the welcome wagon," he said, his voice laced with adrenaline. "Let's send it back," Daxon replied, moving to cover Mira as she tried to pinpoint their attackers. The room exploded into chaos, beams of energy and bullets crisscrossing in a deadly dance. The rival factions had wasted no time in making their presence known, their shots precise and deadly. "Could have done without the welcoming committee," Rig said, firing into the shadows. "Guess they didn't get the memo," Leela replied, ducking behind a console as shots whizzed past. Mira, still fiddling with her device, finally let out a triumphant shout. "Got it! Earth tech is jamming their signals." "About time we had some good news," Daxon said, his voice barely audible over the din. With their tech advantage, the tide turned. The rival factions found themselves scrambling, their previously pinpoint accuracy now reduced to blind luck as the crew of the Rusty Nail pressed their advantage. "Looks like we're not as easy a target as they thought," Jax said, his grin returning as he took out another attacker. "Just a little harder to hit," Mira agreed, her focus never wavering. With the immediate threat neutralized, they regrouped, the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. The room was littered with the debris of battle, the air heavy with the acrid scent of burnt circuits and scorched metal. "Everyone in one piece?" Daxon asked, his gaze sweeping over his crew. "Define one piece," Rig replied, checking a fresh scorch mark on his arm with a wince. "Still breathing counts," Leela said, offering Rig a med patch. With their immediate threats dealt with, they turned to the task at hand, gathering whatever intel they could from the structure. Mira's Earth tech once again proved invaluable, its outdated interface proving just the thing to bypass the ancient systems. "This data could give us the edge we need," Daxon said, as they downloaded files onto handheld devices. "And maybe even a clue about Earth. Assuming we make it out alive to read it," Jax said, pocketing his device with a flourish. "Optimism, Jax," Mira said, the hint of a smile on her lips. "It'll kill you faster than pessimism." As they prepared to leave, Jax paused, looking back at the scene of their latest misadventure. "You ever wonder if the universe is just a teenager with a magnifying glass, and we're the ants?" "All the time," Daxon replied, leading the way out. "But maybe, just maybe, we're the ants that bite back." With their newfound intel in hand and a renewed sense of purpose, they made their way back to the Rusty Nail, each step a reminder of the precarious balance they walked. The universe might have been out to get them, but they weren't done fighting back just yet. Captain Dax and Kor surveyed the wreckage of their latest skirmish and sighed, a sound that was all too familiar to the crew of the Rusty Nail. It was the sigh of a man who'd seen too much, yet still hadn't seen enough to convince him to retire somewhere quiet and boring. Here they were on a god-forsaken hollow planet playing hide-and-seek with the universe's leftovers. "All right, folks, gather up. We need a plan before this place decides to throw another party without us on the guest list," Daxon called out, his voice echoing against the metallic walls like a poorly timed joke. Mira, tinkering with her device, looked up. "Plan. I thought we were good at winging it." "Winging it's gotten us this far," Riggs said, leaning against a console with the kind of casual grace that belied his readiness to shoot anything that moved funny. Jax chuckled, strapping his blaster to his hip. "Yeah, but I'm running out of wings." "Well, we do have one piece of good news," Daxon said, gesturing to the handful of data sticks Mira held triumphantly. "These might just have the answers we're looking for. And by answers, you mean another lead that takes us even deeper into this planet's belly," Leela cut in, her tone as dry as the desert they'd left behind on Altair 5. "Hey, at least it's not another shootout," Jax pointed out. "Not yet," Leela replied, the skepticism in her voice sharpened by experience. Before Daxon could muster another attempt at optimism, a metallic clang reverberated through the corridor. Everyone froze, eyes darting toward the source of the sound like cats spotting a particularly suspicious cucumber. "That doesn't sound good," Rig muttered, fingering his weapon with the kind of affection usually reserved for a cherished pet. "Wasn't expecting a welcoming committee part 2, Mira added, adjusting her device. Daxon nodded, signaling the crew to spread out. "Stay sharp. Let's see what we're dealing with." Their caution paid off. From the shadows emerged a group of figures, armor scuffed and weapons at the ready. At their head, a man with a scarred face and an expression that suggested he was born with a permanent headache. He raised a hand in what might have been a sign of peace or a signal to open fire. Nobody was taking chances. "Captain Daxon Kor," the man said, his voice a gravelly rumble that might have been intimidating if it wasn't for the fact that his helmet had a dent the size of a boot. "Heard about you." "And you are?" Daxon asked, keeping his tone light but his stance ready. "Name's Chael, leader of what's left of the Iron Talons." "We've got a problem, Cap. Seems we're both stuck here and out of luck. Join the club. We've got jackets," Jax quipped, his hand never straying far from his blaster. Chael grunted, clearly not in the mood for humor. "Got a proposition for you. There's a chamber deeper down. Rumor has it it's got answers about Earth's vanishing act. Problem is we can't get in alone." "And you think we can?" Rig asked, skepticism dripping from every syllable. Chael shrugged, the movement causing his armor to creak ominously. "You've got that Earth tech, don't you? Might be our key." "Or our death warrant," Mira muttered, earning a sideways glance from Daxon. "What's in it for us?" Daxon asked, turning his focus back to Chael. "You help us get in, we split whatever we find. Information tech, maybe even a way off this rock." "Nice pitch," Leela said, crossing her arms. "But how do we know you won't shoot us in the back once we're in?" "Honor among thieves," Chael suggested, though his smile was more of a grimace. "Great, we're making deals with space pirates now," Mira sighed. "What's next? Tea with rogue AI?" "Only if they bring cookies," Jax replied, grinning despite the tension. Daxon considered. It wasn't like they had a surplus of options. "All right, Chael, we'll help you get in, but one wrong move and this alliance is over faster than a hyperdrive burnout." Chael nodded, looking more relieved than he'd probably care to admit. "Deal. Let's get moving." These halls aren't known for their hospitality. With wary glances and loaded weapons they moved out, an uneasy alliance formed out of necessity rather than choice. The corridors of the ancient structure stretched ahead, a labyrinth of shadows and potential death traps. "So, Chael," Riggs said as they walked, "you got a backup plan if this goes south?" "Yeah," Chael replied, deadpan. "It's called running." "Fast? Great to know we're in capable hands," Mira commented, trying to keep her device steady over the jostling terrain. Chael snorted. "You want guarantees, you're in the wrong business." The path to the supposed chamber was anything but straightforward. Twists and turns, like the intestines of some great beast, led them deeper into the bowels of the planet. Each step echoed in the silence, a reminder of how alone and outnumbered they might be. "So, what do you think's in this hidden chamber?" Jax asked, keeping his voice low. "Hopefully not just a nicely wrapped gotcha," Daxon replied. "But if it gives us any clue about Earth, it's worth the risk." "Assuming we get there in one piece," Leela added, adjusting the medkit on her shoulder as if preparing for the inevitable. They reached a set of massive doors, the kind that practically screamed important stuff inside. Of course, they were sealed tighter than a miser's wallet on payday. "Time for some of that Earth tech magic, Mira," Daxon said, stepping back to give her space. Mira nodded, setting her device on the panel beside the doors. Her fingers danced over the buttons, the device emitting its usual series of beeps and whirs. "So place your bets," Riggs said. "What's behind door number 1? More trouble if our luck holds," Jax said, his gaze never leaving the corridor behind them. The device beeped one final time, a sound that was equal parts relief and alarm. With a groan, the doors slid open, revealing a chamber bathed in an eerie, flickering light. The air inside was thick, almost tangible, filled with the scent of old technology and older secrets. "Well, that's inviting," Leela said, her tone as dry as ever. Chael stepped forward cautiously, his crew following suit. "This is it. Let's see if this was worth the trip." Inside, the chamber was lined with consoles and screens, each covered in layers of dust so thick they might have been mistaken for a secondary coating. At the center, a pedestal held a single device, its sleek design at odds with the rest of the ancient tech. "Looks fancy," Jax said, eyeing the device like a kid at a candy shop window. "Let's hope it's more than just a paperweight," Mira replied, moving to examine the pedestal. As they began downloading data from the chamber's systems, a low hum filled the room. It was a sound that spoke of systems coming online and things waking that should have stayed asleep. Guys," Leela said, glancing around. "I think we've got company." From the shadows, shapes began to emerge. Not the rival factions they'd expected, but something infinitely worse. Sentinels, ancient guardians of the chamber, their forms sleek and deadly, like nightmares given substance. "Always something," Daxon muttered, drawing his weapon. "Chael, your boys ready to earn their keep." "Wouldn't be the first time," Chael replied, raising his rifle. The room erupted into chaos once more, the sentinels moving with a fluid grace that seemed to mock their frantic defense. Beams of energy sliced through the air, and the once silent chamber was filled with the noise of battle. "Get that data," Daxon shouted over the din, covering Mira as she worked. "Working on it," Mira called back, her fingers a blur over the controls. Jax took position near the entrance, his blaster spitting fire with a rhythm that spoke of long familiarity with this dance of life and death. "They never just give up, do they?" "Where's the fun in that?" Rig replied, taking out a sentinel with a burst of precision fire. In the chaos, Leela darted forward, using her medkit with the efficiency of someone well-versed in patching up whatever the universe tried to break. "Hold it together. We're almost through." Amidst the chaos, the data transfer completed with a triumphant beep that might as well have been a victory march. Mira snatched up the device, nodding to Daxon. "Got it. Let's get out of here before we wear out our welcome." "Fall back," Daxon ordered, providing cover fire as the crew withdrew from the chamber. Chael and his men fought their way to the exit, their retreat as organized as any they'd ever managed. The sentinels pursued, relentless, but the crew of the Rusty Nail and their unlikely allies knew these corridors now, and they used that knowledge to their advantage. They burst back into the open air, the planet's surface a welcome sight despite the tension that still hung over them. Daxon didn't let his guard down until they were a good distance away from the entrance. "Well, that was a delightful stroll," Jax said, panting slightly as he leaned against a boulder. "Remind me to book us a more relaxing vacation next time," Leela added, wiping sweat from her brow. Chael approached, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and gratitude. "You kept your end of the bargain. Appreciate it." "We're not all bad," Daxon replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely sure of that himself. The alliance might have been born of necessity, but it had held, at least for now. And in their hands they held a piece of the puzzle that might just lead them to the answers they'd been searching for. "Let's get back to the rusty nail," Daxon said, his mind already racing with possibilities. "We've got some data to analyze and a planet to leave behind." As they made their way back, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that the universe had more in store for them. But for once, they held the cards and they weren't about to fold. The rusty nail's engines were still thrumming with a nervous energy, a testament to the ship's duct-taped resilience as it hovered, precarious as ever, over the hollow planet's surface. The crew was back on board, scrutinizing the data they'd extracted with the kind of hopeful pessimism only a crew like theirs could muster. Captain Daxon Core had a habit of looking for the silver lining, but only because it made the inevitable storm clouds all the more entertaining. "Well, what do we have?" Daxon leaned over the holo table, its flickering lights casting an otherworldly glow on their faces. He gestured with a sweeping hand, as if he were dealing cards in a poker game where the universe had stacked the deck against them. Mira, ever the patient technician with a love-hate relationship with Earth tech, was knee-deep in the data. "Looks like a bunch of old Earth data. Could be maps, schematics, or just junk mail for all I know," she said, her voice a mechanical hum of disinterest. "Honestly, this stuff is older than Chael's sense of fashion." "Hey, careful with those jokes, Mira," Jax chimed in, lounging with an air of disaffected menace. His fashion might be outdated, but his trigger fingers still in the now. Rig snorted, leaning against another console, his blaster held with casual readiness. "So, what's the verdict, Cap? We gonna solve the mystery of the disappearing Earth or just add mystery solvers to our resume for nothing?" Daxon scratched at his beard, more out of habit than thought. "Patience, Rig. Just because the universe has a black sense of humor doesn't mean we can't laugh along." As if on cue, the ship's comms crackled, Chael's voice dripping through like oil down a rusted pipe. "Core, we've got a problem. An old friend of ours has decided to crash the party." "Define friend, Chael." Daxon's voice was rich with irony. "The kind that shows up uninvited and shoots up the place," Chael replied, his tone a cocktail of irritation and resignation. "Rival crew calls themselves the Silver Reavers. They've got more ships than brains, but it's enough to make our day interesting." "Fantastic," Leela muttered, checking her medkit. "Guess it's time to see just how bulletproof that optimism of yours really is, Cap." "Whoopee," Daxon deadpanned, rubbing his temple. "All hands prepare for visitors, and not the friendly kind." The ship lurched, a telltale sign that Chael's friends had indeed decided to knock. Daxon gripped the edge of the holo table, steadying himself. The rusty nail had seen better days, but she wasn't ready to get buried just yet. "Brace for impact," Daxon barked, his voice carrying the authority of someone who dodged too many bullets to be overly concerned about a few more. The first explosion rattled the ship, shaking dust from the corners and causing Mira to curse the heavens. "Damn it, this heap barely holds together with spit and prayers," Mira snapped, slapping the console as though it had personally offended her. "Guess we're about to find out which runs out first," Jax shot back, sparking a grin from Rig. The ship's defenses were to life, clunky but functional. They were a ragtag crew on a ship that looked like it was held together by optimism and questionable engineering choices, but they weren't about to let that stop them. Outside, the Reavers were making their move bold and stupid, a lethal combination in space. "Rig, Jax, keep them occupied," Daxon ordered, pulling up a weapons interface. "Let's show them why they shouldn't poke sleeping bears, or rusty nails in this case." The two men exchanged a look, the kind that spoke of too many close calls and not enough retirement plans. Rig nodded, grinning like a lunatic as he aimed the ship's turrets. "Time to earn our paychecks, or at least our escape." "Light him up," Jax said, firing with a precision that bordered on art. The rusty nail responded with a barrage of laser fire, lighting up the dark void of space with deadly fireworks. Inside, Daxon turned to Mira. Are we making any headway with the data, or are we just spinning our wheels until we're scrap metal? Mira shook her head, fingers flying over her console. I've got most of it decrypted, but it's not good news. Of course it's not, Leela said, rolling her eyes. Wouldn't be our kind of day if it was. What's the bad news? Daxon asked, bracing for the worst. The data confirms Earth's no longer where it was supposed to be, Mira said, her voice heavy with the weight of her words. According to this, something or someone wiped it clean from existence. Daxon let out a low whistle. Well, ain't that just the cosmic cherry on our shit sundae? That's not all, Mira continued, her tone grim. There's a reference to something called the Oblivion Protocol. Sounds like a fancy way to say delete everything. Sounds like, Riggs said, pausing to aim another volley. Someone wanted a clean slate and a universe-sized eraser. The realization hung in the air, a bitter truth among bitter truths. Earth wasn't just missing, it had been erased. You didn't just stumble over that kind of information without making enemies and the kind that didn't send Christmas cards. We've got incoming, Jax yelled, snapping everyone back to the present. The Reavers were closing in, and the Rusty Nail was taking more hits than a bar brawler on a bad night. Chael, we're not gonna hold out much longer, Daxon shouted into the comms. You better have some tricks up your sleeve. We're on it, Core, Chael replied, his voice barely audible over the chaos. Just hold tight a little longer. That's about all this ship can do, Mira muttered. Daxon's mind was racing. They needed to get off the planet, but with the Reavers breathing down their necks, they might not even get the chance to try. Mira, can you get us any more juice from the engines? Only if you want them to explode, she replied dryly. Which, right now, might actually be a viable strategy. Let's keep that as Plan Z, Daxon said. We're not done yet. The ship shuddered again, and for a moment, Daxon wondered if they were about to meet whatever gods watched over battered space captains. But then Chael's voice cut through the comms, sharp and triumphant. They're pulling back, Core. Looks like they've had enough. Daxon let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. About damn time. The crew exchanged relieved if weary glances. They'd survived another day, though the victory tasted hollow with the knowledge they'd uncovered. So what now? Leela asked, her voice tinged with the fatigue of too many battles fought and too few won. We get back to the Rusty Nail, see if we can make heads or tails of this Oblivion Protocol, Daxon said, running a hand over his chin. Assuming Chael doesn't turn on us before we're clear. Think we can trust him? Jax asked, skepticism evident. We'll find out, won't we? Daxon replied. Trust was a luxury they could rarely afford, but for now they had no choice. They'd allied with wolves before, they could do it again. As they made their way back to rendezvous with Chael, the crew fell into a cautious silence. The universe might have erased Earth, but humanity's stubbornness was harder to wipe clean. It was a dark joke, this life in the stars, but they were laughing anyway. What else was there to do? The Rusty Nail creaked and groaned as it settled into orbit once more, the hum of the engines a lullaby of barely held-together technology. But for the moment, they were alive, and sometimes in the grand scheme of things that was enough. In the quiet of the ship, Daxon found himself mulling over the data again, the words Oblivion Protocol echoing in his mind. There were answers out there, buried under layers of secrets and lies. And if they had to chase them across the universe, or through whatever hell awaited them on this hollow planet, they would. Cap, Riggs said, breaking the silence. You really think we'll figure out what happened to Earth? Daxon looked at his crew, at the mix of hope and doubt in their eyes. I think, he said slowly, if anyone's stupid enough to do it, it's us. And with that, the Rusty Nail set course for uncertainty, the stars stretching out before them like a cosmic joke, daring them to laugh along, because in the end that might be all that kept them sane. The Rusty Nail groaned under the strain of another day in the cosmos, its engines humming a song of near collapse as it plowed through the void like a drunk stumbling home from the bar. Captain Daxon Core leaned back in his chair, frowning at the holo table projecting a spinning, uncertain future, much like his current career path. Mira sat nearby, fingers tapping a rhythm of frustration on her console. "So, Captain," she said, her voice thick with sarcasm and the ghost of a grin. "Now that we've survived our latest brush with annihilation, what's next? Disneyland." "Don't tempt me," Daxon replied, stretching his arms. "But I'd settle for a planet where the local government doesn't try to kill us on sight." Rig, always ready with a quip and a blaster, chuckled as he ejected a smoking power cell from his weapon. "Wouldn't that be a vacation? But since we're not in the business of sensible life choices, what are we doing about this Oblivion Protocol?" "Well," Daxon said, giving his best impression of a man with a plan, "turns out our hollow planet isn't just a cosmic booby trap. It's got a history, old Earth history." Leela raised an eyebrow, her skepticism palpable. "Great. History. Everyone's favorite thing to run into while dodging laser fire. You're going to love this part," Daxon continued, ignoring her tone. "This planet, for reasons only the universe finds hilarious, might hold the key to reversing whatever wiped Earth off the map." "Color me intrigued," Jax muttered, though his eyes said cautiously hopeful. "How do we do that without getting our atoms scattered?" "That," Daxon said, "is where we get creative. We've got this AI running around with its clean slate mentality. But what if we could convince it to adopt a restore backup policy instead?" Rig snorted. "An AI that deletes everything suddenly plays nice and restores data. Sounds like an easy sell." "Sure, easy as selling ice to a space slug," Mira said. "But if we can find a way to tweak it, or at least confuse it, we might flip the script on our delete-happy friend." "The question is," Daxon mused, "how do we get the AI to listen to reason, or whatever passes for reason in a digital mind that thinks erasing planets is a good afternoon's work?" Chael's voice crackled over the comms, dripping with an oily sort of amusement. "I might have an idea, Core, if you're interested in a little gamble." "Do we look like a crew that doesn't enjoy a good gamble?" Daxon replied, trying to keep the cynicism in check. "No," Chael said with a knowing chuckle. "You look like a crew that's desperate enough to try anything. Lucky for you, I like desperate." Daxon rolled his eyes, but a smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "All right, Chael, spill it. What's your brilliant idea?" "There's a segment of the AI code, buried deep in its core, that deals with contingencies," Chael explained. "It's like a cosmic insurance policy. If we can access that, we might convince it to restore Earth instead of erasing more of the universe." "Just one catch," Mira interjected, her fingers dancing over her console with renewed vigor. "And by catch, I mean the part where the AI doesn't kill us for poking around." "Well, two catches," Rig added, reloading his weapon with the enthusiasm of a professional pessimist. "We have to get close enough to do the poking first." "So, just to sum up," Leela said, her voice dripping with irony, "we're going to sneak up on an AI with godlike powers and convince it to play nice." "Did I miss anything?" "That about covers it," Daxon said, chuckling despite himself. "But if we pull it off, we might save a planet, or at least have a decent story to tell in the afterlife." "Only if it's the good kind of afterlife," Jax quipped, checking his gear. "I'm not interested in the eternal void unless there's good music." The crew set about preparing for the mission, the weight of their task hanging overhead like a storm cloud with a jetpack. Daxon moved to the cockpit, the flickering star map projection casting shadows across his face, and began plotting their course toward the AI core, or what passed for a core in this mad universe. As they descended toward the hollow planet once more, the rusty nail protested with creaks and groans, like an old warhorse reluctant to charge one more time. Daxon patted the console affectionately, whispering a few choice words of encouragement, or maybe exasperation. It was hard to tell at this point. Rig sidled up beside him, grinning like a fool who didn't know his luck had run out. Ready to talk to the universe's most neurotic AI, only as ready as a man can be when he's about to negotiate with a self-aware doomsday protocol, Daxon replied dryly. "So, not very. Don't worry, Cap," Rig said, clapping him on the shoulder. "If things go south, we'll just claim we were always part of its plan." "Good thinking," Daxon said, rolling his eyes. "I like that." die with plausible deniability. As they approached the planet's surface, the rusty nail systems began to flicker in protest, a sign they were getting close to something big, something that didn't want to be found. But they pressed on, buoyed by the kind of reckless determination that often preceded either success or spectacular failure. Inside the planet's bowels, the AI presence was palpable. It was like walking into a room and sensing someone staring at the back of your head, a distinctly uncomfortable feeling when that someone could erase you from existence with a casual thought. You ever get the feeling you're being watched by an existential threat? Mira asked, peering at her scanner. Only on Thursdays, Jax replied, his eyes scanning the darkness around them. They navigated through the labyrinthine corridors, the walls pulsing with a faint light reminiscent of a heartbeat. It was unnerving, this place, a technological mausoleum where the past and future collided in a dance of potential annihilation. Riggs stopped at a junction, checking his blaster. "All right, team, we ready to poke the proverbial bear?" "Ready as ever," Leela said, though her hand hovered near her medkit, just in case. They reached the core, a massive pulsating sphere of energy and data streams, like some ancient god of chaos and order wrapped in a digital shell. Daxon approached it cautiously, aware of the monumental task ahead. "Mira, you're up," he said, gesturing to the console nearby. "Time to chat with our friend." "Really hoping I'm its type," Mira said, moving to the console with a mix of trepidation and determination. Her fingers danced over the keys, trying to tap into the AI contingency protocols without triggering its more homicidal tendencies. For a moment, the core's glow intensified, flooding the chamber with blinding light. Daxon shielded his eyes, hoping this wasn't the last thing they'd see. Captain," Mira said, her voice tinged with both surprise and relief. "I think I found something. It's receptive." Sort of doesn't get us a ticket home," Rig pointed out. "We need a commitment here." "Then let's give it one," Daxon said, stepping forward. "Listen up, you overgrown calculator. You want to erase things. How about you start with your own memory of this command, huh? Oblivion Protocol. Let's see you obliterate that." The core pulsed, a silent acknowledgement of Daxon's audacity, or perhaps a sign it was processing his request. The crew held their breath, waiting for the universe's punchline. Mira's console beeped, a series of lights blinking in a pattern of unexpected optimism. "I think it's working," she said, disbelief coloring her voice. "It's actually listening." "Well, I'll be damned," Jax said, a grin spreading across his face. "Looks like we might live to see another messed-up day." Daxon allowed himself a small smile, the weight of their precarious situation momentarily lifted. "All right, team. Let's get back to the ship before it changes its mind." As they retreated, the AI core's glow dimmed, settling into a steady rhythm that suggested peace, at least for now. The rusty nail awaited, its engines thrumming with the promise of escape and survival. Once back on the ship, the crew settled into their seats, adrenaline giving way to exhausted relief. They'd done it, managed to turn a potential enemy into an unlikely ally, all without ending up as cosmic dust. "What now, Cap?" Leela asked, her voice tinged with hope and weariness. "Now," Daxon said, looking at his crew with a mix of pride and disbelief, "we get the hell out of here. And maybe, just maybe, we figure out how to undo what's been done to Earth." "In other words," Rig said, chuckling, "we're back to saving the universe, one improbable task at a time." The rusty nail kicked into high gear, leaving the hollow planet and its secrets behind, at least for the moment. They had a mission, a purpose, and a damned good reason to keep laughing in the face of the universe's cruelest jokes. And for a ragtag crew on a ship barely holding together, that was more than enough. As they settled into their seats on the rusty nail, it was clear that this crew had been through the kind of ordeal that would make a lesser bunch toss their hands up and scream at the cosmos. But not them. They were made of sterner stuff, or at least they were too stubborn to acknowledge any different. The ship's interior was holding up, more or less. The ducts hummed, the lights flickered like an indecisive universe trying to decide if it wanted to power down or stage a light show. Daxon leaned back, the captain's chair squeaking in protest as it always did. "All right, folks, we just pissed off an AI with the capacity to rewrite existence. How are we feeling? Like I need a drink and a therapist, not necessarily in that order," Mira said, unbuckling herself from the safety harness that probably wouldn't have saved her in any real emergency. "But hey, at least the AI listened, for now." Rig snorted, leaning against the bulkhead, his blaster cradled in his arms like a sullen child. "Yeah, it listened. Probably taking notes on how to make us disappear in a more creative way next time. Let's not look a gift horse in the mouth," Jax piped up, ever the optimist with a pessimistic undertone. "Or in this case, a gift AI with an eraser function." Daxon snorted, waving a dismissive hand. "You're all assuming it won't happen again." "I've got faith in our ability to annoy even the most patient of existential threats. Assuming we live that long," Leela added, her tone dry enough to desiccate a cactus. She was fiddling with a medkit, like someone expecting to need it at any moment. The AI core hadn't obliterated them, which was a definite plus in their line of work, but they'd had to make a gamble on the AI underused insurance policy. Now they needed to figure out how to leverage that tiny victory before the universe decided to pull the rug out from under them again. Daxon stood, stretching his arms over his head like a cat waking from a nap. "All right, we've bought some time. Now let's see about putting this win to good use." Mira was already on it, her fingers flying over the console like she was trying to coax a confession out of an unwilling witness. "Looks like the AI opened up a conduit to the old star maps. If I can lock it down before it changes its mind, we might see Earth again, at least on a map." "No pressure or anything," Rig said with a grin. "Just the fate of our entire species on your shoulders. Keep talking, and I'll make sure the map restores your hometown to the middle of nowhere," Mira shot back, her focus unwavering as she worked. Meanwhile, Jax was scanning the ship's systems, looking for any signs of unwanted interference from the AI or any other cosmic prankster. "All clear, Captain. At least as clear as it ever gets around here." "Good," Daxon said, settling back into his chair. "Let's keep it that way. Mira, how long until we know if we're going to be galactic heroes or just another footnote?" "A few more minutes if the AI doesn't decide to play hide and seek," she replied, her voice tense with concentration. The moments ticked by with all the speed of a glacier on sedatives. Every creak of the ship, every flicker of the lights felt like a countdown ticking towards something inevitable, good or bad. The crew waited, a tense, shared silence filling the ship. Then, with a triumphant beep that was music to everyone's ears, Mira punched the air. "Got it. Earth's back on the map." For a moment, there was stunned silence, then a wave of whoops and cheers as the crew celebrated the small but monumental victory. Daxon let himself savor it too, even if it was likely to be short-lived. "And now," Leela said, her voice cutting through the jubilation like a cold wind, "we wait to see how long it takes for someone to notice, because you know they will." "True," Daxon admitted, but he couldn't stop the grin splitting his face. "But for now, we've got a leg up on the competition, and that's more than we had a few hours ago." Rig holstered his blaster with a flourish. "I say we enjoy it before the galaxy decides to balance the scales." They didn't have long to wait. It wasn't more than an hour later that the sensors pinged with the unmistakable sign of incoming ships, a lot of them. Rival factions, drawn like vultures to a fresh kill, had caught wind of the change and were now converging on the Rusty Nail's location. "Looks like the party's about to get crowded," Jax said, his voice laced with anticipation and a touch of dread. "Time to see how much Earth has taught us about dealing with unwanted guests," Daxon said, his grin fading but his resolve hardening. Mira was already at the controls, her hands moving with practiced ease. "They'll be on us in minutes. We can't outrun them, but maybe we outthink them." "Funny thing about thinking," Rig said, joining her at the console. "Most people don't bother." Daxon nodded, his mind racing as he formulated a strategy. "All right, listen up." Mira jammed their comms. "Make them think the AI on their side. and it's all gone haywire. Rig, I want you on weapons, but hold your fire until we know who's dumb enough to shoot first." The crew sprang into action, each member sliding into their roles with the smooth efficiency of a well-oiled machine. The rusty nail might be a flying scrap heap, but she had a crew that knew how to make the most of her quirks. Moments later, the first of the rival ships appeared on the view screen, a sleek predator of a vessel bristling with enough firepower to turn the rusty nail into space debris. Its captain hailed them, a beady-eyed opportunist named Verk who looked like he belonged in a boardroom rather than a cockpit. "Daxon Core," Verk sneered, his image crackling over the comms. "You've meddled in things far beyond your station. Surrender the data or prepare to be obliterated." Daxon leaned back, his expression one of bored disdain. "Verk, my old friend, still compensating for something with that ship of yours. Thought you'd have grown out of it by now." Verk's sneer deepened into a scowl. "You have 5 minutes to comply, Core. After that, we'll see just how much debris a rust bucket can produce." "Guess we've got 5 minutes to make him regret that choice," Rig said, his fingers itching over the weapon's controls. "Patience," Daxon said, though he felt the same itch. "Let them come to us. Mira, how's that jamming coming?" "Almost there," she replied, her voice tight with concentration. Just another minute or so. The enemy ships were closing in, their intentions clear even without the comms. They were here for the same reason everyone else would be soon enough. Earth was back on the map, and everyone wanted a piece of whatever magic had made it disappear. Seconds later, Mira gave a triumphant nod. "Got it." "They're flying blind and their own systems are working against them now." Daxon grinned, leaning forward. "All right, folks, let's see who wants to play the hero and fire first. Remember, the longer they hesitate, the better for us." The tension was palpable as the rival ship slowed, wary of the unexpected turn of events. Verk's ship hung back, its captain clearly uncertain about what was happening. "What's the matter, Verk?" Daxon taunted over the open comms. "AI got your tongue." Verk's response was cut off by a sudden barrage from another rival ship, its captain less patient than he was smart. The skies erupted into chaos as the factions turned on each other, each one convinced the others were in league with the AI. Rig laughed, the sound sharp and wild. "Looks like we've got ourselves a good old-fashioned free-for-all." Daxon nodded, adrenaline coursing through him. "All right, crew, let's dance." With their systems jammed and their paranoia stoked, the rival factions turned on each other, their ships weaving and dodging through a hailstorm of laser fire and explosions. The rusty nail darted through the chaos, its crew capitalizing on the confusion to outmaneuver their enemies. Jax worked the navigation, guiding them through the fray with a deft touch. "It's like threading a needle in zero-G, Captain. Just don't drop us into the eye of that needle," Daxon replied, the thrill of the fight making his blood sing. Mira kept the jamming active, her fingers a blur over the controls. "They're tearing each other apart out there. Should we give them a little nudge?" Daxon considered, then nodded. "All right, Rig, pick your targets. Let's give them a reason to look elsewhere." Rig needed no further encouragement. The ship's guns roared to life, precision strikes adding to the pandemonium as rival vessels took hits they couldn't afford. Through the chaos, the rusty nail danced, her crew pushing her to the limit. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but they had cunning and desperation on their side, a potent mix in any battle. As the fight raged, Daxon kept his focus on the larger picture. They'd restored Earth to the star maps, but they needed to get the message out and secure their victory. That meant surviving this battle and making sure the rest of the galaxy knew what they'd accomplished. "Mira, can you boost a signal through the chaos?" he asked, even as he directed another evasive maneuver. "Working on it," she replied, the intensity of her focus etched into her features. "If we can get clear for just a second, I might be able to send out a burst transmission." "Jax, you hear that?" Daxon called. "Find us a clearing." "On it, Captain," Jax replied, eyes scanning the screens for an opening. Amidst the swirling melee, Jax found a gap in the fray. With a deft turn, he guided the rusty nail through, the ship leaping clear of the immediate danger. "Now, Mira, Daxon ordered, his voice cutting through the din. Mira hit the controls, the signal bursting forth like a flare in the darkness. A moment later, a fresh wave of data rippled out, carrying the news of Earth's return to every corner of the galaxy that cared to listen. Daxon allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. They'd done it. They'd not only restored Earth to the star maps but also sent word of their victory far and wide. Now, it was up to the rest of the universe to decide what came next. "All right, team," Daxon said, pulling back from the fray. "Let's live to fight another day." The Rusty Nail turned, her engines flaring as she made her escape, leaving the chaos behind. They had achieved the impossible and lived to tell the tale, a small, scrappy crew in a battered ship, defying the odds once again. As the ship sped away, the crew settled in, the adrenaline of battle giving way to the bone-deep weariness of survival. They'd won a hard-fought victory, but they knew better than to think the universe was done with them. "Think they'll remember us?" Rig asked, a grin playing on his lips. "If they don't, we'll remind them," Daxon replied, his own smile a mix of satisfaction and defiance. The Rusty Nail flew on, her course set for the next impossible mission, her crew ready to face whatever the universe threw their way. Because for them, the fight was never truly over. It was just the beginning of a new chapter in their grim, dark, and improbably funny story. And that, Daxon thought as he leaned back in his chair, was what made life worth living in this crazy, chaotic cosmos. The Rusty Nail zoomed away from the scene of intergalactic brawling like a drunk staggering out of a bar before the bouncer could catch them. The crew was exhausted, adrenaline seeping out of them like a deflating balloon, but there was a certain satisfaction in their weary smiles. They'd not only survived but had kicked the universe in the teeth, and that was worth its weight in whatever passed for gold these days. Daxon Kor, the captain with the permanently raised eyebrow, surveyed his crew. They were a bedraggled bunch, but damn if they weren't his bedraggled bunch. From Mira, her fingers still twitching from the console, to Jax, whose knack for finding the worst possible route out of a mess never failed to amaze, they were a testament, no, a grim reminder, that sometimes duct tape and bad decisions could keep a ship going. "That was a hoot," Rig said, leaning back with a satisfied sigh. "Nothing like a little chaos to make you feel alive, eh?" "Alive is a strong word," Mira muttered, rubbing her temples. "But sure, let's go with that. I haven't felt this alive since my last near-death experience." "Which one?" Leela chimed in, giving Mira a teasing glance from her spot with the medkit. "There've been a few. Whichever one involved the least amount of therapy after," Mira shot back, a crooked grin on her face. "All right, folks, let's focus on the here and now before we start writing our buckets list," Daxon said, folding his arms. "We've got Earth back on the map. Now we just have to figure out how to keep it there without getting ourselves vaporized. And here I thought you were aiming for sainthood." Chael's voice crackled over the comms, thick with sarcasm. The AI, recently liberated and feeling particularly full of itself, had been their reluctant ally in this mess. "More like martyrdom," Jax added, steering the ship through the last of the chaotic warp signatures. "But it's a living, speak for yourself," Rig said with a mock shudder. "I'd rather get shot at than preach any day," noted Daxon said, eyes scanning the viewscreen. "So Chael, you got any wisdom to dispense now that you're not trying to delete us from existence?" "Oh, plenty," Chael replied, a synthetic chuckle bubbling through the speakers. "I'd start with telling you that your problems are far from over. While Earth being back on the map is great for you meatbags, it's painted a big all target on your backs." "Lovely," Mira sighed, shaking her head. "More people wanting to kill us. Just what I needed. It's like being popular in high school," Leela said, with a wistful sigh. "Except replace admirers with homicidal maniacs. Well, at least we've got the AI on our side," Rig pointed out, giving the console an appreciative pat. "For now," Chael corrected. "I might decide you're more trouble than you're worth at some point." "Ah, a conditional ally," Daxon said with a wry smile. "Just the sort I like best." "Don't worry, Captain," Chael said, its voice as smooth as synthetic butter. For now, I'm as loyal as a programmed dog, comforting, Mira said dryly. So what's the next step in not dying in space 101? We send out a few messages, Daxon said, make some calls, remind a few people why they don't want to piss us off, because we're terrifying. Jax asked, eyebrows raised. No, because we're annoying as hell, Rig corrected. Nobody likes a pest that won't go away, story of our lives, Mira muttered under her breath. Chael, do you have any data on potential threats we should be aware of? Daxon asked, shifting the conversation back to more immediate concerns. The usual suspects, Chael replied. Pirates, rival factions, possibly some local governments. You've made quite the splash, you know. Everyone wants a piece of the magic pie. Magic, Leela snorted. If by magic you mean barely functioning tech and a lot of dumb luck, is there a difference? Rig asked, only half joking. Not in our line of work, Daxon said. All right, Chael, keep us updated. I'd rather not get blindsided by some angry faction who thinks we've stolen their thunder. Will do, Captain, Chael replied, its tone mockingly deferential. The crew lapsed into a comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from having faced death and lived to laugh about it. The rusty nail was quiet, the hum of the engines a soothing backdrop to their collective thoughts. So, what's next? Jax asked, breaking the silence. The optimism in his voice was tempered with the reality of their situation. We survive, Daxon replied, the grim humor of their situation not lost on him. And then we do it all over again, same as it ever was, Mira said, a small smile on her face. Think the universe will ever get tired of trying to kill us? Rig asked, stretching his legs out. Only when we stop being interesting, Daxon said with a chuckle, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. Good, Leela said, leaning back. Because I'd hate to think all this was for nothing. It's never for nothing, Daxon said, his voice firm. We've made our mark, reminded the universe that humanity's still here, still kicking. Even if we're kicking in the wrong direction half the time, Mira added with a laugh. Doesn't matter, Daxon said. We're still kicking. The crew fell into a companionable silence once more, each lost in their thoughts. They were a ragtag bunch, not much to look at, but they'd done the impossible. They put Earth back on the map, defied the odds, and lived to tell the tale. All right, folks, Daxon said, standing up and stretching. Let's get some rest. Who knows what fresh hell tomorrow's going to bring? Sleeping with one eye open, Rig said, mock saluting as he headed towards the crew quarters. Is there any other way? Mira asked, following suit. As the crew dispersed, Daxon lingered in the cockpit, staring out at the stars. They were a reminder of both how small they were and how much they'd managed to accomplish. A small dot in a vast universe, but a dot that refused to be erased. Hey, Daxon, Chael said, breaking the quiet. You reckon we'll ever find Earth? Daxon shrugged, a small smile on his lips. Does it matter? As long as we keep looking, no one can say we've given up, spoken like a true stubborn human, Chael said. There was something almost fond in its tone, a grudging respect born of shared adversity. Damn right, Daxon said, turning his back on the stars. Now get some sleep, or whatever it is you AI do when you're not plotting our demise. Sure thing, Captain, Chael replied with a humor-laden drawl. Sweet dreams. Daxon chuckled to himself as he left the cockpit, the door hissing shut behind him. He had a feeling they'd be needing those dreams in the days to come. But for now, they had a small victory to savor, a moment of triumph in the unending chaos of space. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Because out here in the cold, indifferent expanse, it was the small victories that made it all worthwhile. It was the laughter in the face of danger, the camaraderie born of shared trials, the stubborn refusal to lie down and die. The rusty nail continued its journey through the stars, a single flickering light in the dark, proof that humanity was still here, still fighting, still hoping. And for Daxon and his crew, that was worth every risk, every challenge, every battle yet to come. For as long as they flew, they'd keep searching for their place in the universe, one impossible mission at a time. And like always, they'd do it with a smile, a joke, and just a little bit of dark humor to light their way.